A missing detail, a vanished clue, and a biscuit without butter hides more than it seems. Welcome to Mystery Parlor. I am your host, Axon. Tell me, where are you tuning in from today? Your voices make these mysteries unforgettable. Let's begin. It began with a biscuit. Not the sort that stops traffic or wins a county fair ribbon, but the kind Fritz serves with breakfast on a Tuesday when Wolfe has decided that muffins are too showy and toast too obvious. Normally, the tray comes balanced, complete. Eggs poached precisely, coffee steaming, and biscuits resting with butter on a china dish that costs more than my suits. That morning, however, the butter was missing. I noticed first. Wolfe didn't speak, just lowered his eyes to the naked biscuit as though Fritz had committed high treason. He cut into it, frowned, and set down his knife. That, for Wolfe, was the equivalent of a 5-alarm fire. "Archie," he said finally, in that molasses slow rumble of his. "Observe." "I did," I told him. "The butter's missing. If this is what calls me away from my eggs, I'll have Saul Panzer investigate the dairy industry." His eyes flicked toward me, dark and heavy-lidded. "Imbecile. It is not the absence, but the presumption of absence." This tray was assembled with deliberation. Fritz would not forget. He pressed a finger against the edge of the plate as though weighing it. Therefore, someone intruded. I leaned back, coffee in hand. Somebody broke in overnight to sabotage breakfast? That's a new kind of felony. Should I call Inspector Kramer or just the health department? He ignored me, which was standard. Wolfe's silence wasn't insult. It was architecture. He built it like a wall and waited for the world to climb it. 5 minutes later, Fritz entered from the kitchen, carrying a small dish of butter, flustered as though Napoleon had lost Waterloo in the pantry. "Mr. Wolfe, I swear it was there when I set the tray. I would not, could not, forget." Wolfe tapped the tablecloth. "Indeed, that is the problem." He cut a glance at me. "The sanctity of this house has been breached." "By someone with cholesterol issues," I muttered. But the look Wolfe gave told me he wasn't joking. To him, a misplaced spice jar could be as serious as a body in the parlor. He leaned back in his chair, eyes closed, fingers steepled under his chin. That meant his brain was already turning the wheel. 10 minutes later, the doorbell rang. Fritz went pale. I sighed and stood, because when the bell rings in the Wolfe household, I'm the one who gets drafted. I opened the door to find a woman standing there, trim with hair like ink and a handbag clutched as though it carried dynamite. "Mr. Wolfe?" she asked. Her voice was steady, but her knuckles were white. "You'll have to settle for Goodwin," I told her. "What's the trouble?" I think I need help. It's about something that was taken. Something small, insignificant. But it matters more than I can explain." From behind me came Wolfe's voice, sonorous and immovable. "Bring her in, Archie." And just like that, the biscuit without butter stopped being a breakfast hiccup and became the start of a case. Fritz took the lady's coat like it might explode and vanished with it, which left me to usher her across the front room and into the office. She moved like a woman who had taught herself not to hurry, but had forgotten why. Up close, the handbag explained the knuckles. It was one of those expensive boxes that look like they hold a violin string and a verdict. I gave her the red leather chair that squeaks a little if you shift wrong and stationed myself where I could catch Wolfe's eye if he tried anything reckless, like standing. He didn't. He was sunk in his custom-built throne as usual, expansive and immovable, a dark tie against a paler shirt, looking at our visitor as if she were a new species of insect that had wandered into the greenhouse. You don't get friendliness from Wolfe. You get gravity. "Your name," he said. "Olivia North," she answered. "Of North and North Fine Foods. We supply butter, cheeses, oils, specialty items to hotels and restaurants." North and North, I said. I've seen your label on tins in Fritz's kingdom. He goes through your cultured butter like I go through shoe leather. Her eyes flicked to me and then back to Wolfe, as if measuring which of us would be more useful. Then you know our work. Yesterday morning, a shipment went to the Grampian Hotel for their breakfast service. The general manager called me at 9 to say their signature presentation was sabotaged. His word. He's fond of big ones. The butter was missing from the trays sent to their VIP suite, and their guests were, well, annoyed. It sounds trivial, I know, but the account is important. We're on probation now, and there's a penalty clause. Wolfe didn't blink. You don't come to me over a penalty clause. No, she said, swallowing. Something else is missing. From our office, one index card, just one, from a locked metal file. Our blend notes. Their handwritten recipes, proportions, temperature logs, supplier codes. There are backups, but one card, labeled North Blend Number 12, is gone. It's a specific cultured butter we created for the Grampian. Taken by whom? I asked. If I knew that, Mr. Goodwin, I would have settled for the police. She gripped the handbag tighter. Last week I wrote to Mr. Wolfe to request a consultation. I left the envelope at our front desk at 6. The next morning, the desk clerk swore he handed it to our courier for the mail pickup, but Mr. Wolfe didn't receive it, I assume, because I didn't hear back. Then yesterday, the hotel incident, and this morning, well. She let her gaze travel, not subtle, to the tray on the side table. Fritz's replacement butter dish sat, there like a bandage applied too late. You took that as a sign, I said. Someone made sure your problem wore tap shoes when it came up our steps. She nodded. It sounds foolish, but the pattern, the missing butter at the hotel, the theft of that single card, and then this house, which I understand is... She sought a polite word for obsessive and settled on precise. Wolfe's eyes half closed. Miss North, what precisely is North Blend number? Paniranda. She wet her lips. A hybrid culture technique we developed with a supplier in Vermont and certain imported ferment strains. It has a specific tang, a higher butterfat, and, well, yes, aroma notes. Restaurants use it for finish. It's proprietary. If a rival supplier got the ratios and temperature ladder, they could replicate it, or ruin our batches. Who has access to the file? Myself, my cousin Franklin, he's co-owner, and our production manager, Marta Dell. The receptionist, Ginny, sees the outside of the cabinet but not the inside. That's by design. Your cousin, Wolfe murmured, as if tasting the word. You are equal shareholders? 45% each, she said. 10% belongs to our aunt, Enid, who lives in Florida and has opinions by phone. Any other enemies? I asked. Her laugh was small and brief. We're in specialty foods in New York. Our enemies multiply by the hour, but a few are relevant. Claude Reeve, the Grampian's food and beverage director, has been angling to force us into a lower price. He's very charming about it. He also has a cousin who runs a rival distributor. There's also a food writer, Dane Varley, who did a piece on artisanal fakery 2 months ago and used a photo of our warehouse to illustrate branding theater. He's been sniffing. And there's our accounts supervisor, Joe Brisk, who wants a raise we can't afford and has the subtlety of a marching band. You've made a start at a circle, I said. That's 4 corners at least. She nodded again, and this time it cost her. She'd come in composed. Now the seams showed. I know how this sounds. Butter and cards. But the hotel's letter today says if there's another incident, they'll cancel. That account keeps 3 of our employees in work, and someone entered a locked cabinet. I didn't go to the police because if this is internal, we could be destroyed by the publicity. I thought Mr. Wolfe might... She glanced at him and stopped, because he was regarding her with that unblinking weight that makes people either tell the truth or confess to a murder they thought about in high school. He said, Miss North. Yes? Why me? She stared, then lowered her eyes. Because the letter I sent last week contained a detail I didn't share with anyone else. A note I found taped under my desk. Ask Wolfe before you lose what you can't replace. I assumed it was a prank. Then the card vanished. I could feel the hairs line up on my neck in neat rows. Wolfe didn't move, but his attention tightened the room. You retained a staff member named Saul Panzer last year, he said, and my eyebrows rose. I hadn't known that. He facilitated a recovery of a stolen consignor list for a boutique in Soho without publicity. Your aunt's friend recommended him. He, in turn, recommended me now. She blinked. Mr. Panzer didn't say he'd spoken to you. He didn't, Wolfe said. He spoke to me about something else. My point. You're not an ingenue. You value discretion. You also brought a disruption into my house. He shifted his gaze to me. Archie, the butter. I gave him the report because I'd already done the basic checks after Fritz fetched the replacement. Pantry window latched from inside, back door bolted with the chain in place, service entry locked, no sign of unnatural smears or crumbs where butter thieves tend to leave love notes. Nothing obvious, I said. If someone came in, it wasn't with muddy boots. Fritz swears he set the dish when he assembled the tray. Between then and Wolfe raising an eyebrow, the butter vanished. Fritz, Wolfe murmured without looking, and as if conjured, Fritz appeared in the doorway. The kitchen has a way of hearing its own name. Sir? On the tray, Wolfe said. Who touched it after you? No one, Fritz said, affronted. I finished, I placed it, and I called Mr. Goodwin to carry it. I turned to warm the coffee. Then, he spread his hands. If you are implying I forgot. I am not, Wolfe said. I am noting that an intrusion here dovetails with Miss North's concerns, and that coincidence is a bully I do not suffer. He rotated his heavy head back to Olivia. Your retainer. She opened the handbag and produced a bank envelope. It made the right sound when it landed on my desk. Money makes a particular, comforting shuffle. Wolfe didn't look at it. He was looking at her face. 10,000, she said, and more if needed. Mr. Wolfe, I don't want to be dramatic, but this is my father's company. He built it. If we lose the Grampian and someone reproduces our blend, it's not just money, it's... She searched for the word and settled on ours. Wolfe inhaled, a slow, deliberate draw. Very well. I will take your case. She closed her eyes once. Hard. When she opened them, her composure had been patched. Thank you. You will provide Mr. Goodwin with a list of everyone with cabinet access, their schedules, and copies of the remaining blend cards. I want your supplier roster, purchase orders for the last 3 months, and any communication with the Grampians' Mr. Reeve. You will not announce that you have sought counsel, and you will behave as though you are resigned to your penalty and otherwise unconcerned. If whoever seeks to harm you thinks he has succeeded, he may accelerate his idiocy. Yes, she said. I can do that. Also, Wolfe said, and his eyes slid to the tray again. You will instruct your staff that their conversations with Mr. Goodwin are privileged. If any of them lie, I will know. She managed a smile. I've read that about you. You have read gossip, Wolfe said. Gossip sometimes tells the truth by accident. I stood. All right. I'll take Miss North's particulars in the front room and call Saul. If he's already peeking through the blinds of this crowd, we can save a little time. Olivia rose, but Wolfe lifted a finger. One moment, Miss North. Your North blend number 12 feet. Is there any marker, any minute signature in the finish that an experienced tongue could detect in the wild? Her brow furrowed. Yes. We use a stage in the culture that gives it a faint hazelnut edge and a clean finish without the usual lactic linger. It tastes quiet. That's the best I can say. Quiet, Wolfe repeated, as if the word had bone marrow. Archie. Yeah? You will go to the Grampian and request samples of everything they served in their VIP breakfast yesterday, all of it, in writing if necessary. You will also discover which guests expressed annoyance and whether any of them have business with North and North or its rivals. Then you will go to Miss North's office and sit in front of the file cabinet that lost its card. You will think. If anyone finds that irritating, you will maintain the mood. I said I'd bring a folding chair. He ignored me. And Archie, before you leave, check the downstairs closet lock and the state of its dust. I wish to know if our intruder entered last night with a key or with audacity. Olivia looked at him. You think someone came here? To signal you? He gave her the civics lesson look. People who toy with trifles often mistake them for toys. This is my house. Whoever removed that butter did so either to scoff or to press. Either way, it was an error. She swallowed again and nodded. I walked her to the hall table and took down what we needed. She wrote neat, deliberate lists. Franklin North, cousin, Marta Dell, production manager, Ginny Lathrop, receptionist, Joe Brisk, accounts, Claude Reeve, Grampian F&B Dane Varley, journalist, plus 3 suppliers with names that would look good on chalkboards. I got cell numbers, home addresses, and the kind of notes people don't mean to reveal, like Marta leaves at 5:58 every day, and Franklin hates almonds, which may not help, but you never know. When she was gone and the door latched, Fritz drifted in again like a guilty angel. If someone entered. No one's blaming you, Fritz, I said. We're just admiring their nerve. He sniffed. I will double-check everything. Mr. Wolfe's breakfast was edible, Wolfe said, which from him is a sonnet. Fritz, dismiss your worry. I require 2 things. Luncheon at the usual time and the absence of more imbecilities in my kitchen. Fritz, reassured by the insult, retreated. I called Saul. He answered on the first half ring. That's Saul. I gave him the names and the outline. He grunted once when I said butter, and again when I said file card. He didn't grunt at Grampian, which meant he already had something. Archie, he said, I'll nose around the hotel side quiet-like. You do the formal and wave your credentials. We'll trip different wires. Fine, I said. If you see a guy named Varley, don't feed him. I hung up and checked the downstairs closet lock. The dust on the top edge was a manuscript, untouched. The lock itself had a faint nick around the keyhole that could have been made by a house key in a hurry or a careless Goodwin last month. I don't hurry with locks. I filed it in the folder marked Maybe. Back in the office, Wolfe had tilted his head and closed his eyes. To a rookie, that looks like a nap. To those of us with tenure, it means he's rearranging furniture in his skull and waiting to hear whether a chair scrapes. You'll be out all day, he said without opening his eyes. The Grampian first, then North and North. Speak to the cousin, the manager, the accounts man. Do not interview the receptionist until later. Why save Ginny? Because receptionists hear what people say when they think they're not yet being listened to. I want your ear tuned. I picked up my hat. And if the butter thief left me a calling card at the hotel? Bring it home, Archie, he said, finally opening his eyes. They were contented in a way you don't see often. Someone had dared him at breakfast, and now his appetite, which is not a small thing, had something to chew. We have been served a biscuit without butter. I intend to see who ate first. The Grampian Hotel has the kind of lobby that makes you wonder if you should tip the marble before you walk across it. Plush carpets, a chandelier that looks like it could crush 3 bellboys if it sneezed, and a reception desk curved like it was drawn by a man who thought straight lines were vulgar. I took the elevator up to the top floor, where breakfast had been served to a set of guests that didn't tolerate missing butter any more than Wolfe tolerated drafty windows. The manager, Claude Reeve, met me at the suite door with the eagerness of a man trying to prove he wasn't guilty, while still hoping you'd notice how important he was. Tall, tan, and and wrapped in a suit cut close enough to whisper. He extended a hand like he was offering me an investment opportunity. "Mr. Goodwin, you're here on behalf of Mr. Wolfe. Quite a reputation, Mr. Wolfe's. I can't imagine how he finds time for food between cases." "He manages," I said, shaking his hand. It was dry and firm, but there was a little tremor under it. Like a man who drank too much coffee or stew too much about theft. "I need a list of everything you served at breakfast yesterday. VIP suite around 8. He blinked. "Everything?" "Everything. Bacon, eggs, juice, pastries, and the butter you didn't serve." The smile tightened. "I assure you, we didn't omit anything intentionally. The trays were checked." "Good," I said. "Then this will be simple. A copy of the order, the kitchen notes, and samples of anything still in stock. I'll need to take them with me." He didn't like that, but he waved me in. The suite was the size of my apartment and had fresher flowers. A dining table stood against the window set for 6. He pointed at it like it was still occupied. This was yesterday's battleground. Mr. and Mrs. Carberry from Boston, their daughter, and 2 guests. They lodged a complaint when the butter was missing. A minor matter, but as you see, they are valued patrons. I asked if they were still around. He said no. Checked out that morning. I took a walk around the table, studying the spread. You could tell by the crumb patterns which chair had been the loudest eater. Reeve trailed me, offering commentary like a tour guide desperate for a tip. "You'll see, we use North and North exclusively. Their products were dependable. But now we're forced to consider alternatives. I warned Miss North last week if she couldn't manage consistency, we'd have to diversify." I stopped and looked at him. "And then one of her recipes disappears. That's rough timing." He smiled thin. "Business is timing, Mr. Goodwin, but I hardly steal recipes. I purchase service." "Sure, and I'm here to make sure nobody stole your breakfast either. I'll need those samples." He sent for a junior manager who appeared with a tray, croissants wrapped in hotel napkins, bacon in plastic, and 3 small glass jars marked with kitchen tape. I packed them neatly. Then I asked, "Any of those Carberries have a link to rival suppliers?" He hesitated. "I wouldn't know. But they did seem unusually interested in the butter, yes." Odd, I thought. Most guests complain about underdone eggs, not missing condiments. That nugget went in my pocket with the jars. I thanked him, left him trying to decide whether he'd been cooperative or exposed, and headed to North and North's offices. The building was a converted warehouse in Tribeca, with a ground floor that smelled of cold metal and cultured dairy. Inside, the front desk was manned by a young woman with red hair and glasses, presumably Ginny the receptionist. She gave me the smile of someone trained to sell cheer, but not to hide nerves. "You're Mr. Goodwin. Miss North told me you'd be coming. Franklin's in the office. Marta's on the floor." I asked about the file cabinet. She pointed me down a corridor. "End of the hall, left-hand room. But it's locked when not in use. Miss North and Franklin both keep keys." I thanked her and headed there. The cabinet stood tall and grey against a wall lined with binders. A tiny brass plate above the lock still shone, but the handle bore faint scratches, shallow like a key had been slid past the edge. I bent close. No force, no crowbar. Someone had used a key or a passable copy. The office door behind me creaked, and a man stepped in. Franklin North looked like his cousin Olivia if you drained out the calm and replaced it with caffeine. His hair was a storm cloud, his tie crooked, and his expression defensive before I'd even spoken. "You're Wolfe's man?" he asked. "I am. Archie Goodwin." He nodded curtly. "I don't see why Liv dragged him into this. A missing card, a missing butter tray. It's absurd." "Absurd gets a lot of business in my line," I said, "and Wolfe doesn't take cases for the scenery. You've got a lock here with scratches and a missing card. Who else had a key?" "Just me, Olivia, and Marta. But Marta wouldn't. She's been with us for 12 years. Ever consider duplicates? Someone borrowing your key? A locksmith? He bristled. I don't misplace keys. Whoever did this, it's sabotage. Probably that food writer, Varley. He's always sniffing around, sneering. Or Reeve. He'd love to force us under. But inside theft, a number I won't believe it. He said it too firmly. That told me he'd already thought about it, and it scared him more than the rivals did. I poked around the office, asked for their staff schedules, noted that Franklin's own desk drawer had a faint powder of almond crumbs. Olivia's note about him hating almonds flashed back. Either he'd changed his tastes, or someone had been snacking where they shouldn't. Marta appeared after a while, tall, steady, with hands that looked like they'd been kneading dough for decades. She shook mine firmly. We work hard here, Mr. Goodwin. If someone's playing tricks, they won't last long. I asked her about the missing card. Her jaw tightened. That card should never have left. I lock that cabinet myself when I finish each evening. But Franklin stayed late last Thursday. He said he was organizing invoices. Franklin's face darkened. Are you accusing me, Marta? She didn't blink. I'm saying you were here after hours when it went missing. That's fact. The temperature in the room dropped 10 degrees. I noted both their reactions, the defensive cousin, the calm but pointed manager, and excused myself before it became a shouting match. Back at reception, Ginny looked up from her keyboard. Did you find what you needed? Pieces, I said. Tell me something. Did anyone unusual come by last week? She hesitated. We get deliveries all the time. Couriers, mail, suppliers, but... Yes. There was a man who asked for Olivia. Said he was a friend. Dark hair, thin, carried a notebook. When I said she was out, he asked about the blends. I didn't tell him, of course, but he lingered. Name? He didn't give it, but he wrote something down before he left. His number, I thought. Then he crumpled it and tossed it. I emptied the bin later. Sorry. Not sorry. That's useful. Did you keep the paper? She shook her head. I should have. I didn't think. I filed that under rookie error, but she'd given me enough. A dark-haired man with a notebook could be our journalist Varley. By the time I got back outside, it was late afternoon. I called Saul and updated him. He'd spent the day sniffing at the Grampian end. Carberries are clean, he said. Old money, not interested in butter formulas. But someone at the hotel kitchen staff took an unusual interest in the order sheets. A dishwasher, part-time, named Evan. Disappeared after shift. I'm looking. Good, I said. Because on my side, Franklin had the chance, Marta has suspicions, and Ginny saw a notebook man. Varley's our top candidate there. Meanwhile, Reeve at the hotel practically screamed motive in a tailored suit. Classic crowd, Saul said. Which one's your prime? Too early, I said. But the scratches on that cabinet lock mean whoever did it had a key or a copy. That keeps it in the family circle. I hung up, flagged a cab, and rode back to the brownstone with a bag full of croissants and jars. Wolfe was waiting in the office, eyes closed, fingers steepled. I set the tray down. He opened his eyes like a man waking only for dessert. Well? Hotel manager's slick, cousin Franklin's nervous, Marta's pointed, receptionist saw a journalist-shaped shadow, and Saul's chasing a dishwasher who vanished. Also your samples. He nodded once. And your impression? Too many possibilities. But someone's turning small crimes into a pattern. Butter missing at a hotel, butter missing here, and a recipe card gone from a locked cabinet. Either we've got a prankster with culinary flair or a rival who likes theater. Wolfe reached for a jar, twisted off the lid, and inhaled. His face didn't change, but his eyes sharpened. He dipped a spoon, tasted, and shut his eyes again. For Wolfe, that was as dramatic as screaming. Archie, he said softly, this is not North Blend number. Oniki that froze me, but it came from the Grampian's order. Yes, which means, he said, leaning back, that their breakfast was not merely sabotaged by omission, it was replaced. And with that, the biscuit without butter had turned into a banquet of trouble. Wolfe didn't take a second spoonful. He set the jar down like a judge lays a gavel, only with more contempt. "Not North Blend 12, he said. "A respectable cultured butter with a shallow body and a perfumed nose. There's a lactic shadow that doesn't belong, and a finish that flattens too quickly. Someone substituted a cousin wearing stolen shoes." "Hotel kitchen swap?" I asked. "Or did our thief sabotage upstream?" "Either is possible," he said. "But the substitution is a performance meant to be noticed. The missing portion at the Grampian made noise. The wrong butter would make more. If the object were merely theft of formulae, no one would clang cymbals in a dining room." "Then we're dealing with a billboard artist," I said. "Varley likes billboards. Reeve likes pressure. Franklin likes not being accused. Pick a flavor." Wolfe closed his eyes. "We will prefer facts. Call Panzer. He will ask his friend in the Department of Health for the Grampian's last 3 delivery logs and temperature audits. Hotels descend into honesty when health cards are mentioned. Also, request purchasing dockets from North and North for the Grampian account. We require line items, initials, and changes." I called Saul. He listened, and I could hear him scribbling like a man who bills by the stroke. "On it," he said. "I've also got a lead on the dishwasher, Evan. Takes night classes at City Tech. Roommate says he picked up a side gig last week. Cash running food samples to a guy who waited in a car at the alley. White sedan, temporary plate." "Find the sedan," I said. "If he's delivering samples, someone's conducting a taste test from the curb." "And Goodwin," Saul added. "Watch your pockets. Whoever staged a swap at a 5-star can stage one in your house." I hung up and found Wolfe watching me with the satisfied look of a cat that has identified a mouse. It will later pretend not to eat. "We will be bait, Archie," he said. "But first, North and North again. Speak with Mr. Brisk." "Accounts man with marching band subtlety," I said. "Right." He waved a hand. "He will have left fingerprints on the notion of money. Investigate." I went back to Tribeca. Joe Brisk had the air of a man who arranged numbers the way children arrange soldiers, all in a row, none brave. Mid-30s, receding hairline doing its civic duty, sleeves rolled with intent. He looked up as I came in and ratcheted a smile into place. "Mr. Goodwin, you want to talk about accounts? We're clean." "That's inspiring," I said. "I'm here about the Grampian dockets. Show me last week's POs, any late changes, and any vendors that touched that order." He pulled files with the eagerness of a dog bringing slippers. I flipped. The handwritten initials were neat except where they weren't. I saw ON and FN on most approvals, MD on production releases. On one change order, dated the afternoon before the hotel breakfast, someone had scratched a note. "Butter quota, split per request, CCR." The initials after it were JB, which could be Joe being a citizen, but the CR had a tail on the R like a flourish. "Claude Reeve likes flourishes." "Who asked for the split?" I said. Brisk folded. "The hotel. Mr. Reeve. He called to say their VIP wanted a lighter option on the side. I logged it." "Meaning what?" "Sub-in. From a second supplier." I watched his face. We keep alternates on file in case of undeliverable product." He swallowed. "We didn't sub anything. I just wrote the request." "Does CR usually ask you for lighter butter?" I asked. He glanced at the door. "He calls a lot. Likes to remind me that hotels have choices. Look, don't make this a thing. If they cancel us, I'm not getting my raise until next century." "Noted," I said. "Any locksmiths in the last month? Key duplication, stuck cabinets?" He blinked. Why? Because when a locked file loses a single card, locksmiths make good conversationalists." He ruffled the pile, stalling, then pulled an invoice. "Hudson Keys. Service call for cabinet alignment last Thursday. Who authorized? He faltered. It went through petty cash. Olivia was in a meeting. Franklin signed the requisition. That's so. I pocketed a copy and stood. You hear from a journalist named Varley? Joe managed a laugh without humor. Here, he calls to educate me on the ethics of butter. He says our marketing is grandmother theater. I told him my grandmother sold shoes. Did you tell him about Blend 12? I'm not suicidal, he said. I left him to his ethics and crossed the floor to production. Marta was at the line, checking temperatures with the focus of a surgeon. I told her about the locksmith. Her eyes cooled. No one told me a locksmith came, she said. Franklin stayed late Thursday. If a stranger touched that cabinet, I should have been here. Maybe the stranger wasn't a stranger, I said. Her jaw worked. Those blends are our work. If Franklin did something foolish, I'll find out, I said. Meanwhile, if a journalist shows, you call me, not him. She nodded once. On the way out, Ginny lifted a hand. Mr. Goodwin? The man with the notebook. He came back today. I told him Miss North was out. He left this. She slid me a card, thick stock, expensive enough to be insecure. Dane Varley, in minimal type. On the back, a penciled line. North's quiet finish isn't quiet anymore. Ask the hotel about batch splits. Scribbling from a man who wanted to be overheard. I got back to the brownstone carrying photocopies, a card, and a headache. Fritz was laying out lunch. Cold roast beef, tarragon potatoes, and a salad that might have been illegal in 3 states for what it did to a vinaigrette. Wolfe inspected it and approved with the movement of a single eyebrow. Report, he said. I gave him the locksmith invoice, the change order, the Varley card. He read in silence, then set the papers down and looked at the ceiling as if it had delivered a pun. Mr. Brisk is malleable, he said. He allowed a request to be memorialized without being executed. Mr. Reeve made the request knowing it would be noticed. Someone encountered a cabinet under the eye of a locksmith. And Mr. Varley wishes us to connect the hotel's split to a change in the blend's character. Varley's either helpful or arranging his own narrative. He is an exhibitionist, Wolfe said. They often bring their own mirrors. Archie, call Mr. Reeve. Tell him I require him here this evening at 7. Inform him that if he declines, I will send a letter to his general manager with a précis of his split request and copies for the Board of Health. Blackmail by gastronomy, I said. Charming. Pressure, Wolfe said. We will see what leaks. I called Reeve. He simpered, protested, tried to schedule for next week, and finally agreed to 7 with the resigned flair of a man who knows when he's on stage. After I hung up, I checked in with Saul. He was at the health department, amiably terrifying a clerk into loving him. 2 items, he said. The Grampian logged 2 coolers delivered yesterday at 6:12 a.m. North and North Dairy and alternate butter marked Chef Sample. Sign-off initials on the alternate sheet match a CR. The temperature log for the alternates is blank, which is a violation. The alternates were in glass jars with kitchen tape labels. Like my jars, I said. Exactly. Also, I found Evan. He's nervous, not missing. Says a freelancer paid cash to spot check products before service. No names. The freelancer rode in a white sedan. Evan thought it was a quality audit. He also thought $50 is a lot of money. It is if you're washing dishes, I said. Get me the plate if you can. I'm on the sedan, the freelancer, and the alternates logs, Saul said. See you before 7. At 4 o'clock, I headed upstairs to change my shirt for the evening show. On the way back down, a small thing tripped me. Not physically, but the way a misplaced word trips your ear. The smell in the hall had shifted. The brownstone smells like books, orchids, and Fritz's conscience. Today there was a dust of something else. I followed it to the door of the plant rooms. They were locked, as always. Fritz keeps keys for the kitchen. Only Wolfe and I keep keys for the orchids. I unlocked, stepped in, and stood still. The air was wet and warm, fans humming, green all around. Wolfe's benches were neat enough that the army could study them. The third bench on the north wall had a slate marker for a Cattleya hybrid Wolfe dotes on. The marker, always at a precise angle, was set a degree off. I know it sounds microscopic, but in that room a degree is a scream. I didn't touch it. I checked the sill. No scuffs, no mud. On the pot lip, a smear. Pale, faintly glossy when the light hit it. I took out my pocket knife, lifted at the tiniest dab, and touched it to my tongue. It wasn't smart, and I wouldn't recommend it, but it told me enough. Fat, not plant oil. Dairy. Someone had been in Wolfe's orchids with butter on a finger, went downstairs and told Wolfe. He didn't explode. He condensed. Subtle trespass, he said softly, eyes colder than a butcher's saw. An intruder who knows we will see. He rose, not all the way, a bare settling forward that to an untrained audience wouldn't register. To me, it was a trumpet. Lock the plant rooms again, wash the handle, then sit where you can see the front in the kitchen. We will not advertise our vigilance. If this person attempts a second message, I want to intercept the courier. I did as instructed. Fritz protested the idea of spies with buttered fingers, then swore to sanitize every surface in the borough. I told him to leave the indignation for dessert and to treat anything unlabeled like it wanted him in prison. At 6:30, Saul arrived with a folder and a face like he'd found mussels out of season. White sedan belongs to a rental agency in Reeves' cousin's name, he said quietly, handing me a copy of the rental agreement. Cousin runs the rival distributor. The freelancer paid Evan in the alley and walked the alternates through a service door the doorman swears he never saw open. My guess, Reeve orchestrated a quality comparison right under his own chandelier. Neat, I said. And the alternates? Jars came from a small packing shop in Queens. They pack for boutique food writers who want samples for features. Guess who has an account? We didn't have to say the name. Varley had taken his mirror and arranged it so he could write a scorching piece about brand illusions, using the hotel as a theater. If North and North broke, he had copy for a month. If they didn't, he had leverage. And if Reeves shaved a margin while it happened, he wouldn't object. At 7 sharp, Reeve arrived. He was more polished than at the hotel, which meant he was nervous. I parked him in the red chair with a view of Wolfe's desk and a view of Saul out of the corner of his eye. If you don't know Saul, you think he's a posture. If you do, you mind your posture. Wolfe said nothing for a full minute. Reeve filled the space with a smile. Mr. Wolfe, how can I? You cannot, Wolfe said. You will oblige. You requested a split on butter for a specific breakfast and arranged for an alternate under your initials. The alternates lacked proper temperature documentation, and you coerced a junior staff member to convey them past protocol. Why? Reeve laughed. It was handsome and empty. You've been misinformed. We routinely test alternates. Not without paperwork, Wolfe said, and not while a rival distributor's sedan idles in your alley. Your cousin obliges you, you oblige him, and together you oblige Miss North by endangering a contract and her reputation. You also oblige a journalist with a taste for spectacle. Reeves' smile held, but the corners tired. Mr. Wolfe, I'm not responsible for a journalist's behavior. We're all just trying to keep costs reasonable. North and North is expensive. They are also honest, Wolfe said. There was weight on the last word. You drew a circle that includes yourself, a relative, Mr. Varley, and perhaps a helpful fool within North and North's walls. I do not care about your margin. I care about my house. Someone entered it with greasy fingers. Reeve blinked like a man who didn't expect butter to be Exhibit A in a burglary. What? You will answer questions, Wolfe said. You will provide names for every vendor your cousin handles, every time you spoke to Mr. Varley in the last 2 weeks, and every employee you pressured to bypass procedure. If you prevaricate, I will enjoy sending my notes to your general manager and the city. Reeve set his jaw. You can't. I can, Wolfe said. You are here because you know I will. There was a pause in which Reeve recalculated his future. He deflated half an inch and named names. While he talked, a quiet scuff sounded in the hall, small, furtive. I moved without moving, turned my head just enough to catch the doorway. A figure passed, quick, compact, not Fritz. I slipped out, silent. At the hall table, the antique butter bell we never use sat where it never sits. The lid was ajar. Inside was a folded card. I took it to the office and handed it to Wolfe. He opened it with 2 fingers, a single line in a tidy, slanted hand. Ask Franklin who paid Hudson Keys. Ask why he needed a spare. Wolfe's eyes flicked to me. Subtle trespass escalates, he said. Our visitor prefers nudges to knocks. He set the card down. Archie, tomorrow you will pry Franklin open. Tonight Mr. Reeve will continue disgorging his schedule. Then we will dine. Fritz! Fritz appeared. The salt, Wolfe said without looking. You moved it. I did not. Fritz began, then stopped, startled. The silver cellar on the sideboard was left hand instead of right, its lid turned a hair. Fritz went pale. He lifted the top Inside, neatly tamped, sat a pat of butter with a tiny cross hatch scored on top. Wolfe didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. Archie, he said, we have our second trespass. Our guest is inside the house. Reeve heard Wolfe say the guest was inside the house and did what men like Reeve do when the floor tilts. He smiled harder. I kept him in the red chair with Saul's profile just in his peripheral and went to the hall with my hands in my pockets and my eyes doing the work. The front door was latched, chain up. The kitchen door had Fritz's evening armor, a slide bolt and a righteous attitude. I checked the cellar stairs. The light was off and the smell was ours, not foreign. If someone had come in fresh, they had the manners of a cat burglar and the feet to match. I went back and told Wolfe the immediate state of our boarders. He didn't nod so much as allow my words to join the pile he was stacking. He turned to Reeve and resumed with a velvet crowbar. Saul asked 3 gentle questions about the sedan, and Reeve denied with the air of a man who has long practiced denying little, specific things and considers himself an artist. When we excused him, he stood, adjusted his cuffs, and put on regret-like cologne. Mr. Wolfe, I hope we can— You hope to survive your own cleverness, Wolfe said. If you have sense, you will develop a taste for plain food. He closed his eyes. That was dismissal. Reeve got it. Saul and I saw him to the door, and on the way back a small thing winked at me from the hallway runner. It was a crumb, not from our table. Too round, too pale. I knelt and pinched it. Buttered bread crumb, faintly sweet. A trail. Not enough for Hansel and Gretel, but enough for Goodwin. I did a slow circuit of the ground floor, checking the places you don't think about if you're trying to be invisible quickly. The corner by the umbrella stand, the under edge of the console table, the sliver behind the fern. At the basement door, I saw it. A smear on the brass knob, the kind you leave when you've got something on your fingers and your mother didn't raise you properly. I dabbed it with a handkerchief, pocketed the proof, and went back to the office. Wolfe opened one eye. Yes. We had a finger on the cellar door, I said, and showed him the darkened square of cloth. Unless Fritz started greasing handles, our friend used it. Came up, went down. I don't know yet. Not down, Wolfe said. Fritz would have met him coming. He shadowed our visitor. He left something and fled. He will be back. Saul's eyebrow did its panzer move. half a notch. So we fish? We bait, Wolfe said. Archie, you will telephone Mr. Franklin North. Inform him that I require him here at 9 this evening. You will not mention the card. You will say only that I have questions about a locksmith he engaged. That will bring him like thunder, I said, or like a kid with a broken vase. Either is satisfactory, Wolfe said. Then call Miss North. Tell her I would appreciate her presence at 9:30. Mr. Brisk at 10. If our intruder wishes to examine my parlor, we will arrange a playbill. I did the calls. Franklin reacted like he'd been waiting to be asked and had rehearsed 3 versions of innocence. Olivia was crisp and brief. She'd be there, thank you. Joe Brisk tried to push tomorrow. I told him tonight would be better for his next pay review, and he discovered a hole in his schedule. Saul, who does not enjoy being idle, planted himself where he could see the front and the passage to the kitchen with a magazine he didn't read. I took the back by the hall table that had developed a taste for props. Wolfe remained at his desk, looking like a sitting judge and thinking like a man laying railroad track under an approaching train. At 8:30, the phone rang. Fritz answered and came to the door as if the caller had asked whether we preferred poisoned or plain. Mr. Varley, he announced, managing to make the name both a courtesy and a diagnosis. Wolfe nodded, and I took the call. Varley's voice had the manic shine of a man who had built a bonfire and wanted credit for the light. Archie Goodwin, how is the great house? Any quiet flavors disturbed? We are collecting autographs, I said. You available to come sign something? He chuckled like a critic anticipating a bad play. I'll be around. You tell Mr. Wolfe that sometimes a demonstration helps people learn, and if he likes his butter untouched, he might consider that recipes and reputations are better served by transparency. I'll consider it. Come by at 11, Varley. Bring your notebook and a white flag. I prefer white linen, he said and clicked off. I passed it to Wolfe. He didn't honor Varley with a reaction. He will come, he said. He's a peacock. They come when called to admire themselves. At 9 sharp, Franklin arrived. He had his coat, but not his calm, and looked like he'd broken up with both coffee and sleep. I put him in the red chair. He tried for indignation and didn't get higher than anxious. Wolfe said, Mr. North, why did you engage Hudson Keys last Thursday? Franklin's eyes did a small sprint. Cabinet alignment. It was sticking. Who paid? Our petty cash. Who signed? I did. Olivia was out. He was too quick. The line came prepared. Why did you need a spare? Wolfe asked. There it was, our note's little dart. Franklin blinked, stalled, and made the choice men make when they know they've already been caught. He lied. I didn't. The locksmith invoice includes a line for duplication, Wolfe said calmly. A spare key. Why? That's not. He looked at me. I looked at him with my best neutral and waited. He swore under his breath. Fine. The cabinet lock is old. The locksmith said the wear pattern was bad, so he made a spare in case the original snapped. Did it? Wolfe asked. No. Defensive again. And I kept both. Where? In my desk. Where your desk keeps its almonds, I said, and watched him wince. Who else knew that the locksmith came? No one. I mean, Marta saw him in the hall, I think. Ginny let him in. So everyone, I said. Did the locksmith open the cabinet? For alignment, he said, and wiped his palms on his knees, which didn't change the moisture in his voice. Look, if you're accusing me of taking that card, don't. I stayed late to sort invoices because we're jammed. That's all. Wolfe's tone went flat as a winter sky. Mr. North, you have permitted a breach in your house and thereby in mine. You are careless, possibly foolish, and perhaps something worse. You will remain seated until Miss North arrives. He remained. If he'd tried to storm, he would have discovered that storming is more effective when you can control your legs. Olivia came at 9:30, precise, her composure on, with a seam of strain that told me she'd had a call or a thought on her way. She sat, looked at Franklin, and didn't speak. That told me she had spoken earlier, and it had not produced health. Wolfe inclined his head. "Miss North, your cousin engaged a locksmith, obtained a spare, and failed to inform you. He excuses it as prudence. He is wrong." She didn't look at Franklin when she said, "We'll change the locks in the morning, all cabinets. Until then, no one accesses them alone." Franklin muttered something about dictatorships that wasn't as quiet as he hoped. I let it slide. There was movement in the hall, a light touch and a pause. Saul didn't move his head, but I saw his eyes tick and knew he was registering footfalls like a metronome. At 10, Joe Brisk arrived, sweaty and apologetic. We put him in the chair family members had warmed and began round 2. Wolfe was delicate with him, and delicacy made Joe leak. He confessed to logging Reeves' split request and admitted the handwriting CR looked like his supervisor's flourish, which meant Reeve had either insisted or Joe had imitated a flourish he'd seen. He denied touching the cabinet, denied talking recipes with journalists, and denied wanting to watch North and North burn as a path to another job. He denied so much he convinced me he mostly wanted a raise. When Wolfe let him go to the front room with a magazine, I stuck my head out to tell him which pages to skip. Saul gave a minute shake of his head. The house was listening. I backed off. A little before 11, the bell chimed with a subdued ding that managed to be both polite and smug. Dane Varley stood on our steps wearing a grin and a scarf, even though the night didn't require it. He carried his notebook like a flag. I brought him in, relieved him of the scarf and a pen I didn't plan to return if he earned it. "Mr. Wolfe," he said, stepping into the office like it was his byline. "You keep a beautiful nest." Wolfe did not get up. "Mr. Varley, you keep a dirty mirror." He laughed. "I keep a mirror that shows what men would rather not see. Brands that sell mythology, chefs who compose theater, distributors who inflate romance to justify margins. I'm the cold water." "You are a meddler who likes an audience," Wolfe said. "You arranged for samples to be walked through a hotel's kitchen in violation of code. You paid a boy in an alley to move them. You then encouraged Mr. Reeve to compare, while his cousin stood ready with an invoice, and you planned to write about the fall of an artisanal emperor. Meanwhile, a file card vanished from North and North, and someone, perhaps you, perhaps a friend, laid breadcrumbs in my hall. I do not like breadcrumbs in my hall." Varley's eyebrows did acrobatics. "You think I broke into your sanctum to place what? Butter?" "Someone did," I said. "We caught their fingerprints in fat. It's a small world. If it's not yours, you know whose. Help yourself and you'll help yourself." He leaned back, enjoying himself. "Mr. Goodwin, I can't be seen as a collaborator, but I can be seen as a man who has questions. For example, who benefits if North and North stumbles? A rival distributor with a menu of light options? A hotel buyer angling for a cut? Or a family member who thinks selling early will save late?" Franklin made a sound. It wasn't a word, but it had verbs in it. Olivia's head snapped right. Varley saw the flinch and fed on it. "Ah," he said soft. "There we are. Family is always the quiet flavor, isn't it? Succession, inheritance, aunties who call from Florida to ask why they aren't getting their dividend." Wolfe's eyelids slid down and up. "Mr. Varley, if you have something to say it in English." Varley's grin widened a notch. "All right. A week ago, I had coffee with a man who asked to be off the record. Don't worry, I'm faithful to my sins. He told me that Franklin North had inquired about how to value a company whose main assets are recipes and relationships. He asked very specific questions about offers from rival distributors. He also asked how scandals affect price." Olivia turned to Franklin. Her voice, when it came, wasn't loud. It didn't need to be. "You went shopping. Franklin threw his hands. "Where broke live. We're skating cash flow every week. Aunt Enid wants her 10% in cash, not goodwill. Reeves squeezing, Varley's circling, and you're in love with our blend cards like they cure cancer. I called a man to find out if a sale would keep us alive." "And stole a spare key on the way?" I asked. "I didn't take that card," he said, too fast. Saul said, from the doorway, very mild, "But someone used your locksmith." "That's a hinge we'll oil later." Wolfe brought his hands together, fingertips kissing. "Enough." The circle tightens. "Mr. Varley, you will sit and be still. You will not deploy rhetoric. Mr. North, you will articulate, slowly, the content of your conversation with the locksmith and when the spare left your possession. Miss North, you will answer only when I ask you. Mr. Goodwin, you will go to the kitchen and telephone Mr. Panzer's friend at the Department of Health. Inform him that the Grampian is conducting unsanctioned product trials in violation of code and that an inspector should appear there at 9 sharp tomorrow morning. Then you will return and call Hudson Keys and ask for the service log from Thursday night." 2 calls, I said. "And if our house guest prefers Act 3? "Their patience is not that of a saint," Wolfe said. "They will preen. We will be here." He glanced at the sideboard. "Fritz will also be here." "Fritz!" Fritz had been hovering at the edge like an anxious cherub. He stepped in. Wolfe's voice gentled half a shade. "Take the salt cellar to the kitchen. Replace it with nothing. Lock your door. If anyone but Mr. Goodwin or me asks to enter, you will shout, not tutor. Shout." "Yes, sir," Fritz said, his dignity rallying at the prospect of legitimate noise. I made the calls. Health was delighted. They love schedules you give them wrapped in violations. Hudson Keys put me on hold with a jingle that would have driven calmer men to violence. While I waited, I looked through the kitchen window at the alley. A car idled at the curb across the street. Not Reeves' make, but very white and very temporarily plated. I wrote the numbers. When the locksmith came back, he confirmed the duplication and gave me a time. 7:18 p.m., Thursday. He also gave me a name. The gentleman who signed for the keys was not Mr. North. It was the lady at reception. Ginny, our neatly cheerful redhead. The spare in her hand for however long. I hung up, wrote it out, and brought it in. Wolfe listened, and there was the smallest shift at the corner of his mouth, the expression he gets when a line he drew behind his eyes touches a dot on the page. "Archie," he said, "tomorrow morning we will see Mr. Reeves squirm for the city. Then we will visit Miss Lathrop and ask why a receptionist needed to sign a locksmith's log. Tonight we will protect our house." He shifted his bulk, an inch forward. "Not more. To an outsider, nothing. To me, a bell. Our intruder plays with butter because he wishes to be thought clever. He's merely indelicate. He will come once more. When he does, you will be the one who answers. The brownstone at night has its own acoustics. The radiator murmurs like an old actor waiting for his cue. The stairs complain if you step wrong, and the street noise comes muted through thick brick. I'd walked those halls enough to know when something didn't belong, so when Wolfe told me I'd be the one to answer, I was already tuning my airs like a piano. Inside the office, Franklin sat with his arms crossed tight, Olivia composed but radiating betrayal, Joe Brisk sweating and picking at his cuff, and Varley lounging like a man in a theater box seat. Saul leaned near the door with a casual posture that didn't fool me. Wolfe had closed his eyes again, but that wasn't rest. It was listening by other means. At 11:20, the first sound came. Not the doorbell, not the phone. A soft scuff on the runner outside the office, then a hesitation. Someone was in the hall, weighing their next move. Saul's gaze flicked my way. He'd caught it too. Wolfe didn't open his eyes. "Archie," he murmured, "answer." I slipped out with the casualness of a man stretching his legs. The hall was dim, lit by the lamp over the table. The umbrella stand was just as it should be, the fern innocent. Then I saw it. The butter bell, back again, though Fritz had sworn he'd carried it off to the kitchen. Its lid sat closed this time. I checked the shadows, quick and sharp. Nothing moving, but the air carried a faint draught. The plant rooms again? I edged closer, keeping one hand loose. The lid lifted without resistance. Inside was no pat this time, but a folded sheet of lined paper. I unfolded it, expecting a jibe. Instead, a sketch. It was a floor plan, our brownstone's ground floor, crudely drawn, but the office and the kitchen were marked with little crosses. A third cross was at the cabinet in the hall where Wolfe keeps his port. At the bottom, in the same slanted hand, 2 words. You choose. I carried it back into the office and laid it on Wolfe's desk. He studied it without touching, his mouth a tight line. Our trespasser plays, he said. They wish us to feel exposed, to imagine choice where none exists. Archie, where precisely was this? Back on the hall table. No one passed me coming or going. Which means, Saul said, they're still inside. That stiffened the air. Franklin muttered an oath. Olivia sat straighter. Brisk whimpered, and even Varley lost a shade of his grin. I was already thinking of the service entry near the kitchen, the one Fritz double bolts. If someone had found a way in there, they could drift through the house like smoke. Archie, Wolfe said, low and final. The cellar. I went. The basement stairs creaked under my weight. If someone was hiding there, they knew I was coming. I took them slow, listening between steps. The light switch flicked and yellow glare spread across concrete and shelves of Wolfe's wines. The rows were neat as soldiers. Too neat. At the far shelf, one bottle was turned wrong way out, labeled to the wall. I crossed, twisted it, and felt it shift light. Behind the bottle was another note, wedged between glass and wood. I pulled it out. Stop feeding wolves, it said. The lamb is already gone. I pocketed it, checked the rest. No body, no burglar, just the residue of a ghost who knew the brownstone better than comfort allowed. Back upstairs, Wolfe read the note, then placed it beside the sketch. He didn't show temper, but his fingers pressed together until the knuckles showed pale. Our lamb, he said, is blend 12. And our shepherd's been asleep, Varley offered, voice silky. Wolfe ignored him. The intruder wishes us to feel helpless, but he cannot resist leaving a trail. Butter crumbs, notes, sketches. He suffers from the vanity of the petty. Archie, what do the details suggest? I thought back over the hall table, the cellar shelf, the butter in the orchids. Someone who's been inside long enough to learn the furniture. Knows where Fritz sets things, where you keep the port, even which bench you favor in the plant rooms. That's not a hotel buyer on a lark. That's someone with proximity. Precisely, Wolfe said. Proximity, which points us back to North and North. Employees with cause to enter here, directly or through suggestion. Miss Lathrop signed for the locksmith's visit. She touched the key. She is likely our courier, but she is not the hand that writes. Olivia leaned forward, her voice taut. Ginny. She's harmless. Wolfe opened his eyes fully. Miss North, harmless people do not sign locksmith ledgers and conceal duplicates, nor do they wander through another man's orchids. Harmlessness is an act. We will see her tomorrow. Franklin gave a bark of laughter. Too loud. So it's Ginny now. The receptionist did all this. She couldn't scheme her way out of a phone bill. On the contrary, Wolfe said. Receptionists are custodians of thresholds. They overhear, they admit, they conceal. That is the very definition of scheme, and someone wished us to see choice in this house. That requires knowledge of this house. Mr. Goodwin, tomorrow you will fetch her. Gladly, I said. But tonight we've still got a poltergeist loose. Saul's right. He's inside, or he was, minutes ago. Want me to sweep again? No, Wolfe said. If he lingers at his peril. His vanity prefers stagecraft, not violence. We will allow him to believe he has unsettled us, and he will return to reinforce the impression. Then we will close the circle. Varley shifted in his chair. You mean to let him run? Dangerous, but delicious. I shot him a look. You're enjoying this too much. He grinned. I enjoy truth. This intruder's playing better theater than I usually get. Then you're the audience, I told him. Not the star. Sit tight. By midnight, Wolfe dismissed Franklin and Olivia with instructions to return the next afternoon. Franklin stomped, Olivia measured her steps, Joe Brisk fled with relief. Varley stayed because Wolfe hadn't told him to leave, and Wolfe has a way of keeping a man where he wants him. After Fritz locked up for the night, Saul and I took turns watching the hall. No more notes, no more butter, no phantom footsteps. At 2, Wolfe called it and sent Saul home with instructions to circle the Grampian again in the morning. When I finally stretched out in my room, the house seemed to hum. Not from threat, though that was there, but from Wolfe's mind turning. He had the scent now, and the biscuit without butter had become a feast. Morning came with Fritz's eggs, and Wolfe's temper sharpened. I gave him my report of the quiet hours. He listened, then said, Bring Miss Lathrop. So I did. Ginny came at 10, her red hair brighter in daylight, her glasses fogged from the chill outside. She carried her cheer like armor, smiling at me as though we were at a company picnic. But her eyes flicked quick, and when I mentioned the locksmith, her hand twitched on her purse. In Wolfe's office, she sat small in the red chair. Wolfe regarded her the way a botanist looks at a plant that may or may not be poisonous. Miss Lathrop, he said, why did you sign for the locksmith last Thursday? She blinked. I was at the desk. He asked for authorization. Mr. Franklin wasn't there, so I signed. Incorrect, Wolfe said. Mr. Franklin was present. He has admitted so. You signed because you wished possession of the spare. Why? Her breath caught. No, Mr. Wolfe, I didn't keep it. He said it needed a name, so Why? Wolfe pressed. Her smile cracked. She looked at me, then at Wolfe, then back to her hands. Because I was told to. By whom? Wolfe asked. She swallowed. Mr. Reeve. That dropped into the room like a stone in water. He called, she hurried on. He said he was working with Franklin. She glanced at him, but he wasn't there to defend himself. And that it would be best if I handled the formality. He said it was routine. He promised, if I helped, there might be a position for me at the hotel later. Better pay. I thought, her voice cracked. I thought it was nothing. Just a signature. Wolfe's eyes closed half a beat longer than usual, then opened, steady as ever. Miss Lathrop, you were a courier. You touched what you did not understand. You let a key leave its family. That is not nothing. That is sabotage. She started to cry, soft and quick, the tears of someone who thought she was playing secretary and found herself in a courtroom. Wolfe didn't soften. He spoke as though dictating to air. Archie, note this. Reeve manipulated a receptionist, procured a duplicate, and used it to extract a recipe card. Our intruder, emboldened, has entered my house twice to leave mementos. Tomorrow, we will end his theater. And when Wolfe said tomorrow, I knew the curtain was about to come down. Ginny Lathrop sat small in the red chair, her hands folded tight as if she could squeeze herself invisible. Wolfe didn't blink at her tears. If you expect him to console, you've got the wrong mountain. He let her sputter and sniffle until the quiet swallowed her again, then said, You will go back to your desk, Miss Lathrop, and remain there. You will not inform Mr. Reeve of this conversation. If you do, I will know. And if I know, the consequences will not be merciful. She nodded, shaky, then tried to summon that receptionist chair as she rose. It didn't stick. When she left, Fritz followed her with eyes that could have served subpoenas. The office settled into its weight again. Wolfe leaned back, shut his eyes, and said, "Archie." "Still here," I said. "We have Reeve manipulating a gatekeeper, acquiring a key, staging alternates in the Grampians' kitchen, and feeding Mr. Varley a scandal. We have Franklin North entertaining the thought of selling his family's company and neglecting his own locks. We have a file card missing and a trespasser indulging himself in my house. The question is not who, but how these threads tangle. Right now they tangle into Reeve's grin," I said. "But Varley's writing his masterpiece on the sidelines, and Franklin looks like he'd sell his mother for a check." "Not sell," Wolfe murmured. "Exchange. He lacks the strength for outright theft. Mr. Reeve is the pivot, but he is not inventive. He requires a partner. That partner is the hand that writes notes and places butter. That hand enjoys display. Reeve enjoys profit. Franklin enjoys survival. Which combination fits the whole?" "Varley plus Reeve," I said. "One gets a story, the other gets leverage. Franklin gets played." "Perhaps," Wolfe said. His lips curved slightly, which in his language is suspicion, not agreement. "We will verify. Assemble them." That meant the full parade. Olivia, Franklin, Brisk, Reeve, Varley, and now Ginny. By evening, they all sat or stood in Wolfe's office, the air thick enough to slice. Fritz brought chairs as though arming the barricades. Saul leaned in his corner again, still and loaded. I took my usual perch with notebook and eyes. Wolfe opened without flourish. "Ladies and gentlemen, your presence here is not courtesy. It is necessity. You have permitted, aided, or exploited an act of sabotage against North and North Fine Foods. You have also permitted trespasses in my own house. Both are intolerable. I will have the truth, and I will have it now." Reeve tried for his practiced smile, but it cracked under Wolfe's gravity. Varley lounged. Franklin squirmed. Olivia was tight as a bowstring. Joe Brisk sweated through his collar, and Ginny clutched her bag like it was a life raft. Wolfe raised a finger. "Miss Lathrop, you have confessed that you signed for a locksmith at Mr. Reeve's request. You have admitted you believed it harmless. It was not. It permitted the theft of a proprietary formula. That theft is the axis on which the rest turns." Reeve jumped in. "Mr. Wolfe, that's absurd." "Silence," Wolfe said, and the word hit like a lid on a pot. Reeve shut his mouth. "Mr. Brisk," Wolfe went on, "you logged a split request from Mr. Reeve, knowing it was improper. You did so because you are susceptible to pressure. Your negligence is contributory. You are not clever enough for invention." Joe flushed but nodded miserably. "Mr. North," Wolfe said, "you engaged a locksmith and obtained a spare, then lied about it. You contemplated selling your company. You're careless, desperate, and malleable. You're not clever enough for invention either." Franklin started to speak, but Olivia's hand stopped him cold. "Mr. Reeve," Wolfe said, "you orchestrated a substitution in the Grampians' kitchen and relied on your cousin's resources. You profit from scandal, but do not create it. You are too timid to enter this house in the night." Reeve bristled. "I'm hardly timid." "You are timid," Wolfe said. "A man who manipulates receptionists to sign locksmith forms does not leave butter in an orchid." Reeve shut his mouth again. Wolfe's gaze shifted. "Mr. Varley, you have style, vanity, and a taste for demonstration. You are clever enough for invention. You desire scandal. You require symbols, breadcrumbs, sketches, taunts. You also require collaboration, because you cannot engineer access without an insider." Varley smiled like he'd been paid in compliments. "I'm flattered." "You are not flattered," Wolfe said. "You are exposed. The spare key, passed through Miss Lathrop, permitted you or your agent to open the cabinet and remove Blend 12. You then collaborated with Mr. Reeve to stage a substitution at the hotel, intending to write of artisanal deceit and thereby ruin North and North. You salted my house with butter as theatre. That was your indulgence. Olivia's breath hitched. Franklin swore. Reeve's face drained color. Ginny whispered, "I didn't know." Varley spread his hands, grinning wider. "And what proof do you have, Mr. Wolfe?" Wolfe's eyes closed, then opened, heavy-lidded. "Proof enough. Mr. Goodwin." I laid out the notes. The sketch of the brownstone, the cellar warning, the butter pat in the salt cellar. Varley glanced at them with recognition he didn't bother disguising. Saul handed over the copy of the rental agreement linking the sedan to Reeve's cousin. Wolfe let the silence work. Finally, Wolfe said, "Mr. Varley, you will find the police unreceptive to your protestations. The Department of Health will descend on the Grampian tomorrow. Mr. Reeve will explain himself there. As for you, you will deliver the Blend 12 card to my office before noon tomorrow, or I will deliver your notes and these exhibits to Inspector Kramer with the story of how a food writer played burglar in my orchids." Varley's grin faltered. "Suppose I don't have the card?" "You have it," Wolfe said. "The lamb is already gone," you wrote. "You have no talent for self-denial. You will bring it." The room held its breath. Reeve cursed under it. Franklin slumped. Olivia sat frozen, but her eyes were alive with fire. Ginny looked like she'd swallowed her job whole and found it poisonous. Varley finally stood, all that energy still there but knotted. "Very well. Noon tomorrow. You'll get your precious card. But I'll still write." "You will write drivel," Wolfe said. "If you are fortunate, it will not be about prison food." Saul moved just enough to let Varley know he was not leaving unobserved. Reeve tried to rise, but Wolfe stopped him with one word. "Sit." Wolfe turned to Olivia. "Miss North, you will take your cousin in hand. If you wish your company to survive, you will expel Reeve's influence, neutralize Varley's nonsense, and secure your staff. Mr. Brisk requires a spine, Miss Lathrop requires dismissal, and Mr. Franklin requires humility. Without these, no butter will save you." She nodded, eyes burning, lips pressed. Wolfe leaned back, satisfied as a man who has not yet eaten but knows the feast is coming. "Archie, see them out, all of them, then bring me beer." I did. The exodus was a parade of faces. Varley still smirking for courage, Reeve tight-lipped and sweating, Franklin dazed, Olivia composed and furious, Brisk and Ginny wilted. Saul slipped out behind them, already arranging the net for tomorrow. When I came back with Wolfe's beer, he held the glass, stared at it, then said, "People think theft is appetite. It is not. Appetite is honest. Theft is cowardice. This little cabal sought profit and publicity and left grease on my doorknob. Tomorrow, Archie, we will close it. Tonight, we will dine." And with that, he lifted the beer, sipped, and shut the case in his mind like a book waiting for its final chapter. Morning came with a frost that made the brownstone windows think in white. Fritz believed in warming a man for battle, so the coffee was stern and the eggs had backbone. Wolfe ate with the serenity of a man who had already filed the day into drawers. When I finished, he gave me the agenda without ceremony. "Health first," he said. "Witness the inspection at the Grampian and secure copies. Then wait for Mr. Varley at noon. If he is late, he will not be forgiven. After that, visit Hudson Keys and collect a description of the gentleman present when Miss Lathrop signed. Return by 3. We will set the stage." I went. The Department of Health had sent a man with a notebook and a face that had seen too many kitchen drains. He met me in the Grampian service corridor at 8:58 and flashed a badge that did most of his talking. We went in together. The hotel kitchen was awake and stainless, humming with the kind of fear that makes people over-clean. Claude Reeve appeared in a jacket that wanted applause and tried to shake the inspector's hand. The inspector didn't notice. We asked for yesterday's logs and deliveries. A sous chef produced folders with reverent hands. The inspector paged like a priest reading sins. When he reached the alternates, glass jars, kitchen tape, a blank temperature lane with CR scribbled in approval, he clicked his tongue. Violation. Reeve started explaining in full paragraphs. We occasionally test artisanal substitutes to ensure our guests have options, and naturally not documented, not held below 41 degrees, not approved through purchasing, the inspector said, ticking each not on the air with his pen. Violation. I took copies. The sous chef produced the remains of the alternates in a walk-in that smelled like an iceberg and fennel. Tape labels matched the jars I'd brought Wolfe last night. The inspector took samples like a man doing yard work, methodical, joyless. He finished with a paper that would trouble Reeve's sleep and told him he'd hear from the city. Out in the alley, I phoned Saul. He grunted approval. He'll spend the day putting out fires, internally, Saul said. Good time to tug threads at the cousin's shop. I'll loiter. I was back at the brownstone at 11:53 when the bell rang. Varley was punctual enough to be dramatic. He wore a coat that thought it was in Paris and held an envelope like he'd written poetry inside. Delivery, he said, and tried to hand it to me with flourish. Save the flourish, I told him. You're not on a stage unless Wolfe says so. I took it, weighed it, and led him in. Wolfe didn't rise, and he didn't make small talk. He looked at the envelope as if it might decide to improve itself. I slit it with my thumbnail and slid out an index card thick enough to be expensive. At the top, in a neat block hand, North Blend number 12. Below, ratios, temperatures, time ladders, and a supplier code. If it was a forgery, it was a conscientious one. Wolfe didn't touch it at first. He leaned, inhaled. Yes, he will smell paper. And then took it between thumb and forefinger like a surgeon lifting a suture. His eyes narrowed. Mr. Varley, he said mildly, you are a magpie. You collect shiny. Did you steal this card personally? Varley went for elegance. I'm an observer and a critic, Mr. Wolfe. Sometimes the truth requires a prop. The truth requires honesty, Wolfe said. This card is not honest. He set it on the blotter, drew a magnifier from the drawer, and bent. I moved to his shoulder. Under the lens, the pencil strokes were clean, with a faint backward slant in the tails of numerals. Left-handed writer or a right-hander with a flourish. But what Wolfe aimed at wasn't the strokes. It was the faint, shallow shadowing in the margins. Pressure lines from the cards above and below when someone writes a stack on a desk. North's cards are kept tightly stacked, he said. Write on one, and you press whispers into its neighbors. See that ghost line, Archie? It curves like an S beside the 82 degrees Celsius here. It doesn't belong to this text. It belongs to what was above it in the stack. That means this card was in the file when it was written. And yet these notations, he tapped 2 temperature ladders, are not in Miss North's hand. They are imitations. The figures are right. The feel is not. Someone traced what they did not understand. Varley's smile tugged in the middle. I never claimed to be a calligrapher. You claim to be a moralist, and you are not that either, Wolfe said. This is the card, but not as it left Miss North's cabinet. The supplier code has been altered by a single digit. He tapped the last line. A 7, where Miss North writes a hooked one. Whoever copied wanted to disguise the chain to prevent us from checking the source, and whoever returned it wanted us to think we were whole. I turned it over. The back carried the impression of another word, reversed and faint. North Bell. No, North Bell. Then I had it. North Bellin? North Belline? Number North and Bellini. I looked up. Isn't Bellini the Vermont supplier Olivia mentioned? She never told me the exact name. She told me, Wolfe said, and she does not abbreviate to and. He looked at Varley again. Pretty, Mr. Varley. Sloppy. Varley's color rose half a tone. "You have your prop, Mr. Wolfe. Are we done?" "We will be," Wolfe said, "when you provide the name of the man who wrote this. If you do not, I will say you wrote it." Varley laughed, but it had a tightened edge. "You're trying to get me to turn on a source. That's adorable. I'm not in your employ." "You are in my house," Wolfe said. "And someone with your hand, or your vanity, touched my orchids. That makes you a vandal. Do not confuse my patience with weakness." He lifted his chin a degree. "Archie." I took Varley's pen from my pocket. It was heavier than it looked, with a worn knurling where a man's thumb pushes without thinking. The nib was needle-fine. The inside of the cap carried a smear of graphite. The body smelled faintly of cedar and something citrus. I spun it once. "You wrote the notes you left here with pencil, not ink. You also draw with a straight edge. Your sketch lines were too true for a free hand. Your pen has graphite on its cap. If you didn't write them, your friend did, using your tools. Either way, you're inside it." He rolled his eyes. "I'm surrounded by fetishists." "You're surrounded by attention," I said. "That's what you wanted." "Have some," he almost retorted, then thought better and left. Saul ghosted him out and down the steps. I watched from the window as Varley crossed to a white sedan, not our rental friend, another, got in, and sat a minute before pulling away. Making a call or thinking of adjectives. Hudson Keys was next. The shop sat on a block that sold 3 kinds of nothing and specialized in quiet. The locksmith recognized me as the voice from last night and warmed when I mentioned Wolfe. I asked for Thursday's log. He gave me a copy and, unprompted, a description. Reception gal signed. Red hair, cheerful, the way receptionists are by training. And she had a friend with her, not the boss gentleman. He frowned. Tall, lean, scarf. Talked like every sentence had a camera. He did more of the talking than she did. Writerly, I suggested. Or theatrical, he said. He told me to be careful with the old warding on the cabinet. Not his business to know the phrase old warding, but there it was. I showed him Varley's card. He brightened. That's him. When I got back, Wolfe had moved exactly not at all and had thought 6 miles. I gave him the description. He accepted it like tribute. Good. Mr. Varley caged Miss Lathrop and then handled what he shouldn't. Mr. Reeve caged Mr. Brisk and then staged his alternates. Mr. North caged himself in his foolishness. Add a nudge from outside and the stew is complete. Outside? He opened his eyes at me, tolerant. Archie, you tasted fat in my orchids yesterday. You found a note behind the wine with a line fit for a melodrama. The lamb is already gone. Varley writes with a sneer, not with a chapel. The phrasing is wrong. Then he has a partner who likes a pulpit, I said. Who? Wolfe didn't answer immediately. He stretched fingers once and then folded them again. Prepare the office for this evening, all of them. Miss North, Mr. Brisk, Miss Lathrop, Mr. Reeve, Mr. Varley, and one additional guest. Call Mr. Dane Varley's editor. His editor, Wolfe repeated. The man who signs his expenses and buys his jars from that packing shop in Queens. He will be useful ballast. His mouth went sardonic, and send a note by messenger to Mr. Reeve's cousin, the distributor. Word it thus. Your sedan has acquired a personality. If you wish to keep it and your license, attend at 7. Sign my name. That'll bring him, I said. He'll think we're throwing a party and he's the punch. We are, Wolfe said. But he is not the punch. He is the lemon. The afternoon ticked like a metronome. Olivia called to say she'd be prompt. Franklin didn't call at all, which meant he'd either come sullen or not come at all. Joe Brisk called twice to ask if he should bring ledgers, because men like Joe believe paper can save them. I told him to bring himself and deodorant. Ginny didn't call. She sent a text apology no one had requested. Saul reported that Reeves spent lunchtime in the general manager's office doing a monologue in low tones that wouldn't change a violation. He also said Varley met a man in a cafe on Houston and handed over a small tin. Saul didn't get to the tin. He did get the man's face with a camera in his pocket. At 5, I took a walk through the house. The hall table was clean, the cellar knob polished, the orchids serene. Fritz had laid out the evening cold cuts like offerings to a precise god. He looked at me. If there is butter in any of my rooms tonight that I did not place, I will emigrate. Hold your passport, I told him. We'll keep it dry. At 6, Wolfe called me in and handed me a sheet of his paper with 3 lines written in his large block hand. It was the bones of the thing as he saw it. Substitution, pressure, display. Under those, partner, pulpit voice. And below that, a name I didn't expect. Marta. I must have shown it. He didn't scold me for the face. He rarely bothers. She is proud, he said. A craftsman's pride. She also resents Mr. Franklin's incompetence and Miss North's devotion to the past. She would justify a sin as protection of a product. A pulpit voice. She left the cabinet locked, kept the temperatures like a liturgy. I said, "Does that make her the hand that wrote those notes?" "No," Wolfe said. I did not say she walked in my orchids. I said she is the voice that would justify the theft of a card to prevent the corruption of a blend by hotel money and cousins' discounts, and then chose to frighten Miss North into conceding control. She could whisper to Mr. Varley under the cover of contempt for branding theatre. He would lap it like cream. I thought of the way Marta had said, "We work hard here, and if someone's playing tricks, they won't last long," in the tone of a judge who has already written the sentence. I also thought of the smear of almond on Franklin's desk and the way Marta had looked at him when she said he'd stayed late. "You think she fed Varley," I said, "and let him do the dirty at the hotel." "Or tolerated it," Wolfe said. "Both suffice. Tonight we will see." At 7, the parade formed. Olivia first, precise and flammable. Franklin next, defensive in a clean shirt he hadn't earned. Brisk behind, carrying a folder like a rosary. Ginny small and pale. Reeve gleaming, tight at the mouth. Varley with a smile lacquered over irritation. And last, Reeve's cousin, Vincent, a man with the face of an expensive shoe and the self-assurance to match. Saul brought up the rear like punctuation. Wolfe let them settle in their gravity and then lifted the lid on his voice. "You are here because you have muddied appetite with cowardice. I dislike both when they come together. Tonight you will hear a reconstruction. You will not interrupt. You will answer when I tell you. And then I will hand you to the people who enjoy paperwork." Varley smirked. "The police?" "Lawyers," Wolfe said blandly. "They have better furniture." He looked at me. "Archie." I set the card on the blotter beside the jars from the Grampian and the Health Department's papers. Wolfe touched none of it. He just spoke. North and North's Blend 12 was stolen with a spare key obtained by Miss Lathrop at Mr. Reeves' request, under the eye, and perhaps the blessing, of Miss Dell, who believed she was defending her craft from compromise. Mr. Varley obtained the card and copied it, altering the supplier code to conceal a direct check. He returned the card today because I told him to. In parallel, Mr. Reeve introduced alternates into his kitchen to create the melodrama he and Mr. Varley both desired. He for price leverage, Mr. Varley for prose. Mr. North, adrift, served as an unwitting shield. Mr. Brisk as a lever. The trespasses in my house were Mr. Varley's indulgence, his taste for theatre, assisted by a courier who had learned our corridors from deliveries. His eyes slanted to Reeves' cousin. "Mr. Vincent, your driver has been familiar with West 35th Street for 6 weeks. Tell him I extend my greetings and my contempt." Vincent's mouth did a lawyer's trick. No muscle moved, but the eyes updated their story. "You make a lot of claims, Mr. Wolfe." "I make statements," Wolfe said, "and I will prove them. But first, Miss Dell, Marta had arrived during the last sentences, quiet as flour settling. She stood in the doorway now, tall, steady, hands folded. She hadn't been invited, or rather, Wolfe had invited her by telling Olivia an hour earlier to ask her to bring the day's temperature sheets. Olivia had done it. Marta stepped in when Wolfe said her name and did not sit. "Miss Dell," Wolfe said, "you love the product you make. You loathe the idea that a hotel's buyer, through Mr. Reeve, can demand a lighter profile or cheaper fat. You loathe that Mr. North is careless and that Miss North is loyal to a memory. You would steal your own recipe to keep it from being cheapened under your name. You did not plan an article. You planned a warning." Marta looked at Olivia once, and there was pain there, not malice. Then she looked at Wolfe. "I didn't steal anything for myself." "You facilitated," Wolfe said. "You told Mr. Varley enough for him to fashion a morality play and told yourself you were safeguarding a craft. He used your righteousness to dress his spite. While you were nourishing your pride, he nourished his appetite." Her jaw clenched. "I told him no such thing." "You told him," Wolfe said, "that quiet finish was being lost. He wrote that phrase on a card he left at my hall table. Your words out of his hand." She moved then, a fraction. Olivia's breath left her. Franklin swore again, but softly. Wolfe's voice dropped. "It will end now. Archie, telephone Inspector Kramer. Tell him I have Mr. Varley returning stolen property, Mr. Reeve and his cousin staging health violations, and Miss Dell available for a statement on how conscience, mishandled, becomes complicity. Then tell Fritz we will require another chair. Mr. Kramer is stout." I went for the phone. The room behind me held its breath as if the walls were waiting for the law. Wolfe didn't raise his voice. He didn't have to. The geometry of the evening had been drawn. All that was left was to walk them along the lines until they reached the point. Inspector Kramer made his entrance the way winter fronts do, noisy, undeniable, and with a whiff of tobacco that could fell a lesser fern. Fritz had braced for him with an extra chair and a tray that Kramer ignored on principle. He took in the room with a sweep, clocked Varley's silk, Reeve's starch, Franklin's pallor, Olivia's set jaw, Brisk's perspiration, Ginny's prayerful clutch on her handbag, Vincent's loyally calm, and Marta standing straight as a plumb line near the door. Then he fixed on Wolfe. "All right, Wolfe," he said, dropping into the chair that had been warned of his arrival. "You sang me a tune on the phone about stolen trade secrets, a hotel playing patty cake with the health code, and your sacred butter getting fingered. I brought ears. Make them earn their keep." Wolfe inclined his head just enough to identify the movement as intention. "Good evening, Inspector. You will hear a reconstruction." He nodded once at me. "Proceed." It was my cue to arrange the exhibits like ornaments on a tree. The health department violation copies from the Grampian, the jars with kitchen tape, the rental agreement for the white sedan in Vincent's relative's name, the locksmith log with Ginny's signature and the description of her companion, the index card labeled North Blend number 12 with the doctored supplier digit, the 2 notes our trespasser had left in the brownstone and the sketch of our ground floor, and Varley's card with graphite freckles on the cap. Kramer's eyes did the circuit like a man counting unhatched trouble. Wolfe's voice stayed level, the tone he uses to teach a lesson to an unwilling student. Miss North's file yielded a single missing card. Mr. Reeve, desirous of leverage against her price, arranged with his cousin for alternates to enter his kitchen in violation of code, aided by a bribed junior and blessed by his initials. Mr. Varley, desirous of narrative, obtained the missing card via a spare key procured through Miss Lathrop at Mr. Reeve's request. He copied the card, poorly, altered a supplier digit to prevent verification, and returned it today under duress. He then salted my house with trifles to amplify his melodrama. Meanwhile, Miss Dell, whose pride in her craft is fierce, fed Mr. Varley language and context under the conviction she was guarding a standard from adulteration. Mr. North, malleable, supplied convenience. Mr. Brisk wrote what he should have refused. Miss Lathrop signed what she should have escalated. Mr. Vincent supplied mobility. That is the braid. Kramer's gaze moved, slow and heavy. That's a lot of fancy rope. Who hangs on it? Mr. Varley and Mr. Reeve, Wolfe said. With Mr. Vincent as ballast, the others will have to answer for negligence and collusion, and Miss Dell for complicity of conscience. But the theft and the kitchen fraud sit there. He didn't point. He doesn't need to. Reeve found his courage and stood it on quivering legs. Inspector, this is theatrical nonsense. We trial alternates routinely. If the temperature line is blank, that's a clerical oversight. As for the card, why would I steal a recipe? I buy from North and North. They're expensive, yes, but... Sit, Kramer grunted. Save air. He jabbed a finger at the jars. That your tape? Your initials. Reeve's mouth tightened. Those are my initials. Uh-huh. Kramer turned his head the way a bull tests a fence. Varley. Varley had his smile back, polished to a gloss that could skate. Inspector, I'm a journalist. Kramer cut him off with a snort. Don't we me. You carried a note into Wolfe's cellar like a Boy Scout leaving breadcrumbs for a raccoon. You paid a dishwasher in an alley to move unlabeled jars past code. You've got your fingerprints all over your own pen cap. You want to test my patience on First Amendment tap dancing? Do it after Wolfe hands me 3 different kinds of paperwork. Varley's grin held, but the paint was cracking around the edges. Wolfe steepled his fingers. Inspector, you will find the locksmith's description convincing. Miss Lathrop with a companion who spoke with terminology he should not know and wore a scarf like a pennant. Mr. Panzer has a photograph of that companion's face leaving a cafe on Houston this afternoon with Mr. Varley's tin in his hand. Saul, from the wall, produced a print and handed it over. It showed Varley with a man whose jaw wanted to be famous. Name? Kramer grunted. Evan Ross, Saul said. Freelance fixer for food writers and marketing outfits. He's the freelancer who paid the dishwasher at the Grampian. He's also been a taster on Mr. Varley's pieces that require props. Kramer nodded, the slow kind. We'll find him. Wolfe's voice deepened a fraction. Inspector, you will also wish to know that Mr. Varley's editor authorized sample purchases from the packing shop in Queens and signed travel vouchers on days when North and North's warehouse received inquiries from anonymous culinary researchers. Mr. Varley does not play alone. He looked at Varley without heat. You will give us the card's chain. If you don't, I will give the chain to the public, attached to your name. Varley's laugh was thin now. Scandal sells, Mr. Wolfe. I'll write it better. You will write drivel, Wolfe said, because you have missed the only interesting thing. He turned his head to Marta. Miss Dell, when you told Mr. Varley that the quiet finish was being lost, you were not complaining about brand. You were complaining about the intrusion of a lighter fat on your culture ladder. Mr. Reeves' split request was to smuggle that lighter profile into your line without your consent. You bristled, and you were right to bristle. You were wrong to feed a vulture. Marta's mouth flattened. I didn't feed him. He took what he wanted. You gave him the seed, Wolfe said. He grew a weed. Olivia breathed once, hard. Marta, why didn't you come to me? Marta looked at her, and for a beat the room adjusted its lighting to 2 women who had been building something together and had run their hands into brambles. Because you would have kept making it perfect, she said low, and they were already pushing to make it cheaper. I wanted to scare them off. You scared the wrong beast, Wolfe said. You gave scent to a jackal and a suit. They will not scare. Kramer tapped the doctored recipe card with a thick forefinger. You said this digit, this supplier code, was altered. Yes, Wolfe said. Miss North forms her 1 with a small starting hook. This is a 7 without a crossbar, executed to mimic a 1. It would misdirect a call to Vermont and prolong Mr. Varley's pretense. Mr. Varley. Varley shrugged. I don't do calligraphy. You don't do restraint, Wolfe said. Who wrote it? Varley took a breath, measured, and put his smile away. That made him look younger and less certain. You want the card's chain? Fine. The receptionist signed, the locksmith cut, the fixer delivered, the writer photographed, the buyer staged. I didn't break your locks, Mr. Wolfe. I wouldn't insult you. As for your orchids, if you think I smeared them with butter, you're giving me more poetry than I deserve. The house, the notes, that wasn't me. It wasn't an absolution. It was a new road. Kramer turned his head. Then who? Varley's eyes flicked, not to Reeve, not to Vincent, not to Ginny or Brisk. They slid, quick and guilty, toward Franklin. It would have been laughable if it hadn't fit like a key. Franklin recoiled. Me? You think Are you insane? I can't sneak across a room without kicking furniture. You don't have to, I said. You live in rooms like these. Doors and runners are your species, and we heard a scuff the night Reeve was here. Someone who knew which boards complain and which don't. Wolfe's head moved 1/8 of an inch. No, Archie. Mr. North is noisy even when he thinks. The hand that left butter in my orchids is smaller and more careful. It is a house-trained hand. Miss Lathrop. Ginny's fingers convulsed into the strap of her bag. Mr. Wolfe, I didn't mean, he said. Her voice broke over the stones and poured out the little brook it had dammed. Mr. Varley said leaving a note would make Mr. Wolfe look sooner. He said you liked puzzles. He said it would help Miss North. The first time I only moved the butter dish when Mr. Goodwin's back was turned. The second, I used my lunch break. I'm good with quiet doors. I used to bring deliveries here when I worked for a florist. She wiped at her face. I'm sorry. The room inhaled. Reeve cursed under his breath. Olivia pressed her knuckles to her mouth. Franklin shut his eyes like he'd swallowed a tack. Marta's expression didn't change at all. Varley didn't smile. Wolfe's tone went glacial. Miss Lathrop, you will be grateful that your intent was idiot benevolence. You will also be grateful that this house is mine and I decide whether to prosecute the trespass. I will not if you will give the inspector a full, unembroidered account of Mr. Reeve's instructions, Mr. Varley's inducements, and every door you opened. Ginny nodded fast, sobbing now, everything shaking. Kramer leaned back, grip easing on the armrest. He gave Wolfe a look that was half irritation and half a respect he would deny on the hour. So we've got a journalist with sticky fingers, a hotel man with empty logs, a distributor cousin with a lazy plate, a receptionist with more nerve than sense, a production chief who thought righteousness was a security system, and a brother who'd pawned the furniture to keep the lights on. He pointed a thumb at Vincent. And you? You got any prayers? Vincent smiled without teeth. Counsel? You'll need it, Kramer said. He looked at Reeve. You too. Reeve swallowed. Whatever remained of his polish had migrated south. Inspector, this is business. Everyone tests alternates. It isn't criminal. It is, Kramer said, when you lie on the sheet and smuggle them through a door, and when one of your tests includes property you don't own. He flicked a glance at the card. That's theft. We like those. Varley tried to recover altitude. Inspector, there's no statute against investigating corporate branding. North and North sells myth as much as... Save it for your editor, Kramer snapped. Who, by the way, is going to discover what it means when one of his boys uses expense accounts to pay a fixer who buys felonies with cash. Wolfe raised a hand, and the noise decanted. Inspector, you have enough for your warrants. Mr. Varley will give you Mr. Ross. Mr. Reeve will give you his cousin's texts. Mr. Vincent will consider the charms of cooperation. Miss Lathrop will tell you whether Mr. Varley or Mr. Reeve use the word key first. Miss Dell will tell you what she told Mr. Varley, and Mr. Brisk will show you his CR flourish. Mr. North will promise Miss North he will not touch another cabinet again without supervision. He let that sit, then added, "And you will leave me to my dinner." Kramer puffed. "You always do want dessert first." He stood, joints complaining. "All right, I'll take the papers, I'll take the jars, I'll take the pen, and I'll take the lot of them downtown if they sneeze wrong." He turned to Olivia. "Ma'am, you'll want a lawyer who speaks food. Get one before lunch. Keep a lid on any press." He jerked his head at Varley. "Including his." Varley lifted his chin. "I'll write it anyway." "You'll write about the weather," Kramer said, "and like it. Move." They began to unspool. Saul made a few calls with his thumbs and names walked into nets you couldn't see. Reeve, deflated, found his coat. Vincent already had a number dialing behind his eyes. Brisk was almost effusively grateful to be scolded by a cop instead of a judge. Ginny, blotting her face, promised everything in a shaky chain. Marta stood, took a breath, and then turned to Olivia. "I'm sorry," she said. It sounded like an admission and a plea and a sentence. Olivia's reply was steady. "We'll talk at the office." They left, and the brownstone absorbed the space they'd occupied like the ocean taking back a footprint. Kramer gathered his portfolio of sins and gave Wolfe a narrow look. "You don't like people in your house, and yet somehow your house is always where they confess." Wolfe didn't rise to it. "They are more honest in my chairs." "Yeah," Kramer said, "because you serve them the bill." He grunted. "You'll hear from me if this turns sideways." "You will not," Wolfe said. "It will proceed forward. Please take Mr. Goodwin's notes." Kramer snorted, tucked a folder under his arm, and lumbered out, taking Winter and Smoke with him. Silence reassembled, slow and clean. Fritz, who knows when not to pretend he was elsewhere, appeared to collect glasses. Wolfe exhaled a long, satisfied breath. It wasn't triumph. It was relief from stupidity. I slid into my chair and let my shoulders unclench. "Not bad for a biscuit," I said. He gave me the sidelong, indulgent glance he keeps for me and beer. "It was never about the biscuit," he murmured. "It was about a trespass disguised as a trifle. That is the worst kind." "And blend 12. Miss North will keep it," he said. "She will also change her locks, tame her cousin, and learn to mistrust rhetorical saviors." He closed his eyes, fingers steepled again, the mountain going back to being a mountain. "We will dine." "After one more thing," I said. He sighed. "What?" "Tomorrow," I told him. "You have lunch with a man from Vermont who writes his ones with hooks." His mouth twitched. Fritz announced that dinner was ready, as if it hadn't been waiting for us all along, and the brownstone, having been disturbed, began its slow return to silence. The next morning the brownstone woke up as if nothing had ever happened to it, which is one of its gifts. The floors remember your shoes but not your sins. The books mind their paper, and the orchids pretend they've never heard of human folly. If you want absolution, churches have competition on West 35th Street. I had coffee with Fritz's opinion in it and brought Wolfe the early returns. Kramer had done his winterfront act downtown. Evan Ross, the fixer who liked cash and alleys, had been scooped before breakfast and discovered that city chairs are harder than cafe stools. He sang enough to tune a choir. He'd handled logistics for Varley on 3 other pieces that blurred the line between journalism and cosplay, and he'd been the middleman for our spare key and our jars. Reeve's cousin Vincent had found cooperation more attractive when shown a sample list of finds. The rental paperwork for the white sedan and a tidy thread of texts between him and Reeve made a wreath around their enterprise. Reeve himself had tried to sell industry best practices to a prosecutor allergic to euphemism and was contemplating a leave of absence that would outlast his career. The health department posted their violation publicly enough to make the Grampians' chandelier blush. "Good," Wolfe said. Not because he wanted to scalp Wall, but because stupidity had been given a chair instead of a pedestal. He signed the sigh with a tilt of the head and told me to expect Olivia at 11. She came with winter still in her cheeks and a folder under her arm that meant business. She didn't sit until Wolfe flicked 2 fingers at the red chair. She didn't waste words. "Franklin has resigned his authority over operations," she said. "He retains his shares. Our aunt would make a will out of dynamite if we tried to force a sale, but he will not sign a loan. Marta remains on probation. She brought me a letter this morning, a real one, not email. It's an apology, written like a recipe. She admits she spoke to Mr. Varley, denies giving him specifics, and asks to rebuild trust by being barred from access to the blend cards unless I'm present." She set the letter on Wolfe's desk. "Joe Brisk will attend a training I should have sent him to 2 years ago on compliance and saying no. Ginny is gone, with severance, because I won't make a public martyr out of a controlled variable with a bright smile." She inhaled. "We changed the cabinet locks at 8. Bellini's supplier code is corrected in our master file. The card you recovered went back into the stack. Each card is now in a sleeve. We won't print any future formulas without micro-engraved numbers. If someone takes one, I'll know which and when and why." Wolfe listened with the indulgence he reserves for competence. "And your hotel account?" "We will lose the Grampian," she said, frank, "but we will announce this afternoon that we are withdrawing until their testing policies meet code, and we will name their violations without naming our own wounds. There are other hotels. Our reputation is more fragile than contracts and heavier than invoices." "And your aunt?" Wolfe asked. Olivia smiled without humor. "Enid called. She believes this is a plot by my enemies to keep her from Florida views. I told her that if she reminded Franklin once more that she prefers cash, I would liquidate her position and ship her a crate of butter with a mirror." She laughed. "Then she asked me how to buy my beer. I told her to ask me again in a month." Wolfe closed his eyes briefly, which on him is the equivalent of applause. "You will persist. The craft will survive the histrionics of men who like rooms with chandeliers." She stood, then hesitated. "Mr. Wolfe, I'm supposed to say thank you, and I do, but I also want to say something else. You knew it wasn't about money entirely. It was about someone touching what we made as if it didn't matter. When you took the butter out of that jar and said it was wrong, you were angrier than I was." She glanced toward the plant rooms. "I hope your orchids forgive us." "They are more tolerant than I," he said, "because they cannot read." She left with a little more oxygen in her walk. After she'd gone, I found Wolfe looking at the index card still on his blotter. The real one, with the tiny ghosts in the margin and the hook on the 1. He didn't pick it up. He seldom touches what doesn't belong to him twice. By noon, I had the call from Saul that all the winners had accepted their prizes. Varley's editor had taken a sudden interest in ethics, which is what editors do when their advertisers call before lunch. Varley himself, cornered between a code violation and a fixer who had discovered the virtues of singing, was cooperating with nuance. If you think that phrase tastes like old spinach, you should try it warm. Reeve had surrendered his initials to a committee. Vincent had confined his swagger to legal letters. Evan Ross asked for a public defender and discovered there are men who don't find food metaphors charming. I brought Wolfe the bulletin and found him with a new letter in his hand, delivered by messenger. The envelope smelled of butter, which made me consider arson. He slid out a single sheet, read it, and handed it to me. It was from Marta. She didn't grovel. She simply set down in clear lines that she had allowed her pride to become a wall that ignored a door marked "Talk to Olivia." She had believed she was protecting a craft from dilution. She had been wrong about means and right about fear. She would accept any condition that kept the blends honest. She wouldn't ask forgiveness from Wolfe for the orchids. She would earn it by keeping fingerprints out of kitchens. Wolfe refolded the letter with an economy that would make a banker blush. There, he said. A mind with ballast. You're keeping her out of prison by letting Kramer call it complicity of conscience, I said. You getting soft? He shut his eyes. A flick. I'm reserving my disdain for the men who make theft into a sermon. You'll need a hymn book, I said. At 2, Franklin showed up with a face that wanted the floor to open and a paper bag that made Fritz reevaluate him. He asked for 1 minute. Wolfe gave him half. I can't fix what I did, Franklin said, standing because men who are not allowed to sit say their words faster. I was scared. I hate numbers. I hate Reeve. I hate that Aunt Enid thinks butter is a checking account. I thought if I could sell at the right moment, I'd save us. I was wrong. Olivia is keeping me where I can't break anything. I'll do what she tells me. If you want me to pay you back personally, You will do nothing personally, Wolfe said. You will do it correctly, under Miss North's hand, or you will do nothing at all. Do not attempt redemption with gestures. Make fewer mistakes. Franklin swallowed, nodded, and left the bag with Fritz, 2 jars from Bellini, handwritten note on top, for Mr. Wolfe's palate with gratitude. Fritz handled them like relics. Wolfe didn't smile, but the corner of his mouth remembered how. The afternoon had one more ripple. Kramer called to say that Varley had decided to compose a piece not about the fall of boutique butter, but about the importance of chain of custody in food service, which would read like a confession if you knew where to put the commas. He wanted to know if Wolfe objected. I object to oxygen, Wolfe said, and hung up. He was in a mood. You could say the case ended there, but that would be the sort of lie people tell themselves to make sleep easier. There's always an epilogue in our racket, and it showed up at 6 in the form of a knock that announced Vermont. Bellini himself, compact, weathered, with hands like he'd been in love with cows longer than some men stay married, came in with a hat he actually removed when he saw Wolfe. He produced a tin and asked if he might use our kitchen to temper a test. Fritz looked as close to religious as I've seen him. We gave the men their stage. 10 minutes later, a cultured butter the color of a late afternoon sat on a plate that had seen too much drama this week. Bellini watched Wolfe taste it the way a father watches a pediatrician. Wolfe set down the knife, took a breath like a man told he does not have cancer, and said, "Good." Bellini's shoulders dropped an inch. "We'll keep making it, Mr. Wolfe. If the world gets louder, we won't. Either way, it'll be number 12. When he left, the brownstone, having been trespassed, inspected, lectured, and fed, settled another layer into itself. Fritz set the table for dinner with the tight-lipped triumph of a man who has defended a nation with tarragon. I fetched the beer. Wolfe arranged his bulk in the chair that has listened to more crimes than most precincts and waited for Fritz to bring the plates. "You notice something," I said, leaning on the jam. The man who wanted to cheapen the butter used showmanship. The man who wanted to expose the theater used showmanship. The woman who wanted to protect the craft used theater when she thought talking wouldn't work. Different motives, same stage. Because they wanted an audience, Wolfe said. The appetite for attention is older and more ruinous than the appetite for food. The latter is honest. The former pollutes kitchens, words, and, when it can, justice. It also pollutes hall tables, I said. Should I buy a new butter bell? No, he said. We will not allow a fool to select our furnishings. I took that as clearance to keep living. We sat. Fritz brought the roast chicken with its skin burnished like a verdict you can respect, potatoes that let you forgive men for many things, and a salad the color of reason. Wolfe ate with the concentration he gives to orchids and cases, which is the same concentration he gives to everything he considers worthy. When we'd made respectable dents and I had refilled his glass, he leaned back and let the house finish the work of peace. "Archie," he said. "Present. If I ever find butter in my orchids again, I will relocate to a place where human beings are not permitted." You'll take me? I asked. He sent me a look like a reprimand sharpened on affection. Do not be fatuous. Only on weekdays, I said. And for the record, I caught the notes, the jars, the men in scarves, the cousin with the sedan, the fixer with the cash, the handwriting on the card, you observed what I asked you to observe, he said, which is more than most men do. Will you allow me to conclude? By all means, I said, and saluted with my fork. He set his fingertips together. People think the sanctity of a house is superstition. It is not. It is a discipline. It is knowing where the salt sits and why. When men come into a house to prove that nothing is sacred, they leave grease everywhere they touch. They cannot help it. That is how we catch them. He closed his eyes, and his voice softened the 1 degree it does when a truth is being placed gently on a plate. There is no justice in a biscuit without butter. There is only slovenliness. Justice, when it arrives, brings its own salt. That was Wolfe, giving me the moral with my beer. If you want a punchline, go to a vaudeville. I pushed back my chair and told him I'd put a little extra oil on the front door chain. He grunted, which in our dialect covered gratitude, command, and good night. The brownstone returned to its climate. Somewhere on the top floor, the radiators performed their private opera. Downstairs, a chair remembered Kramer's weight and forgave him, and in the plant rooms, something green and absurdly fragile went on, making beauty without asking permission. I turned off the hall lamp, checked the locks out of habit instead of fear, and went upstairs, full of chicken and justice and the right amount of salt. The storm outside the brownstone had lost its teeth, leaving only the hiss of wet tires on the street and the occasional gust that rattled against the windows. Inside, the air was thick with cigar smoke and the last traces of roast chicken. Wolfe had not moved from his chair since Fritz cleared the plates. His bulk settled as if the chair had grown around him. The orchids, fed and luminous, seemed to lean closer as if they too wanted to hear his summation. It was the hour when he always gathered the threads, the hour when my pencil knew it had better keep up. I was already in my spot, pad ready, when Wolfe finally shifted, pressed his fingers together, and began to speak. The resolution, he said, is as plain as it is unpalatable. Varley sought to exploit a spectacle. He would have sold the North family's reputation, and by extension, our own. Reeve, with his spurious stewardship, sought to profit by concealing faults and magnifying errors. Vincent was their courier, a pliant vessel. Ross, an opportunist, was their engine. Marta, misguided, attempted to shield her work with secrecy rather than candor, which made her an unwitting accomplice. Franklin North's timidity was an opening that allowed these opportunists to insert themselves. He paused, taking a breath through his nose as if he could still smell the faint tang of Bellini's butter in the air. But Olivia North, he continued, has done what others would not. She faced the indignity, acknowledged it, and set her house in order. She has transformed a liability into the beginning of a defense. That will outlast both Reeve's duplicity and Varley's treachery. I scratched it all down, though I didn't need to. It was one of those pronouncements I'd remember word for word, the kind Wolfe made when he wanted to fix the conclusion in stone. He leaned back, eyes half closed, the rumble of his voice settling deeper. The truth, Archie, is that theft of butter is no less grotesque than theft of jewels, for in each case the thief assumes that the labor of another is his plaything. The mistake of these men was not their greed. Greed is common. It was their presumption that they could soil the sanctity of this house and of honest craft without consequence. That presumption has been corrected. I waited, pencil hovering, because I knew he wasn't done. There is an irony, he said at last. They sought attention, and they got it. But they will not control the narrative. Instead, their names will circulate in the less flattering pages of the papers. in the margins of court transcripts, in the whispered advice passed from one employer to another. Beware these men, that is the true verdict. He opened his eyes, heavy-lidded but burning, and fixed me. And Archie, do not suppose that justice is always grand. Sometimes it is a jar, returned to its shelf. Sometimes it is a card, restored to its box. Sometimes it is only the certainty that a house, once trespassed, has closed its door again. I laid the pencil down because there wasn't more to be said. The case was done, not in fireworks, but in that Wolfe way, complete, exact, and final. The doorbell rang then, sharp in the hush. I moved to answer, already guessing. Sure enough, Kramer was on the stoop, hat low against the drizzle. He didn't ask permission to step inside. He never does. He took one look at Wolfe through the smoke, nodded once, and said, "It's wrapped." Ross folded. "Varley's out. Reeve won't work in this town again. Thought you'd want to hear it." "I'd already heard it," Wolfe said without opening his eyes. Kramer grunted, but there was the smallest flicker of satisfaction in his face. He knew Wolfe had been ahead, as always. He left without further ceremony, taking the wet air with him. When the door shut, I turned back. Wolfe was already reaching for a book. He would read until bedtime, and tomorrow would begin like nothing had happened. But I knew better. I knew the brownstone had felt the breach and healed it, the way a tree swallows the scar of an axe. I knew that butter, of all things, had been the battlefield for greed, betrayal, and redemption, and that Wolfe had once again turned the disorder of human folly into order. And I knew as I turned out the hall light later that the sanctity of the house remained intact. Fragile, perhaps, but intact. That was the case of the butter blends, and like every case with Wolfe, it ended not with drama, but with inevitability, which is, after all, the truest form of justice, 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 form of justice,